1.
Ultra-cinematic sci-fi scene inside a damaged space station corridor. A human engineer kneeling beside an exposed water purification unit, sparks faintly glowing from broken circuits, dim flickering amber emergency lights casting long shadows, background chaos with blurred silhouettes of people rushing, metallic walls scorched and cracked, cables hanging loose, atmosphere filled with dust particles and soft volumetric light beams. Hyper-detailed environment, realistic textures, shallow depth of field focusing on hands repairing machinery, dramatic lighting, gritty survival tone, 16:9 wide angle, no text, no borders.
2.
Close-up cinematic shot of human hands carefully repairing a microcircuit inside a futuristic device, delicate precision tools glowing faintly, background softly blurred showing chaotic space station interior, sparks and flickering light reflections on metallic surfaces, subtle sweat and dirt on hands, hyperrealistic texture detail, soft blue and amber lighting contrast, shallow depth of field. Emotional focus on craftsmanship and calmness in chaos, 16:9 composition, no text, no borders. 3. Small alien child with shimmering silver blue skin and 4 glowing amber eyes standing in front of a workbench, holding a broken 6-legged robotic toy with one leg dangling, human engineer slightly out of focus behind the bench, warm light illuminating the child's face, background full of movement and station chaos, cinematic framing, emotional contrast between innocence and destruction, ultra-detailed skin texture and reflective lighting, 16:9, no text, no borders.
4.
Over-the-shoulder view from behind the engineer as he examines the broken alien toy, the child standing across the workbench watching intensely, glowing circuitry exposed inside toy, soft ambient station lighting mixed with flickering emergency red, blurred crowd moving behind, cinematic storytelling composition, high realism, subtle dust in air, 16:9, no text, no borders.
5.
Extreme close-up of alien toy being repaired, cracked casing opened revealing delicate futuristic circuitry, glowing conductive adhesive sealing a broken connection, reflections of light dancing across metallic surfaces, engineers' steady fingers in frame, macro-level detail, shallow depth of field, cinematic lighting, 16:9, no text, no borders.
6.
Emotional moment where the toy reactivates, soft glowing pulse and gentle vibration visible, alien child holding it close with wide luminous eyes filled with wonder, background slightly blurred, engineer watching quietly, warm soft lighting highlighting emotional connection, cinematic depth, 16:9, no text, no borders.
7.
Daily routine scene, alien child sitting beside engineer watching him work on large station machinery, scattered tools and components across workbench, natural interaction, soft industrial lighting, calm after chaos tone, background slightly active but not frantic, cinematic composition, 16:9, no text, no borders.
8.
Medium shot of child pointing at exposed wires asking a question, engineer crouched explaining, subtle glow from circuitry lighting their faces, mother figure watching from distance in soft focus, layered emotional depth, cinematic storytelling, 16:9, no text, no borders.
9.
Alien mother standing in doorway watching engineer and child, expression mixed with caution and curiosity, soft backlight outlining her silhouette, depth of field separating her from foreground, warm ambient tones, cinematic framing, 16:9, no text, no borders.
10.
Sudden chaos scene, red emergency lights flashing, people running through corridor, engineer grabbing child while debris begins to fall, dynamic motion blur, sparks and smoke in air, intense cinematic action shot, high contrast lighting, 16:9, no text, no borders. 11. Heroic protective moment, engineer shielding child and mother as ceiling collapses, debris frozen midair, dramatic lighting with dust clouds illuminated, strong emotional focus, slow motion cinematic feel, 16:9, no text, no borders.
12.
Aftermath scene, quiet dust-filled corridor, engineer injured slightly, mother tending to his wound, child leaning against him holding toy, soft diffused light, Emotional stillness after chaos. Cinematic realism. 16:9. No text, no borders. 13. Shelter interior. Warm, dim lighting. Small safe space with scattered tools. Child asleep leaning on engineer's shoulder. Peaceful contrast to earlier chaos. Soft shadows. Intimate framing. 16:9. No text, no borders. 14. Time skip scene. Shared workspace lively and functional. Engineer teaching child circuits. Multiple components and tools organized. Mother assisting. Environment now stable. Brighter lighting tone. Cinematic composition. 16:9. No text, no borders. 15. Close-up of child building advanced circuit independently. Focused expression. Glowing wires and small sparks. Engineer observing proudly in background blur. Detailed futuristic tech design. 16:9. No text, no borders. 16. Emotional identity moment. Child hugging engineer tightly, calling him father figure. Mother standing close beside them. Soft golden lighting. Intimate framing. Strong emotional focus. Cinematic realism. 16:9. No text, no borders. 17. Collaborative engineering scene. Three working together on larger system blueprint, holographic display, or physical layout glowing faintly, hands interacting with design, sense of teamwork and innovation. 16:9. No text, no borders.
18.
Second crisis scene. System failing again. Sparks flying. Engineer directing while child actively helps. Mother managing tools. Dynamic teamwork moment. Intense but controlled energy. Cinematic lighting. 16:9. No text, no borders. 19. Stabilized system glowing steadily. All three standing together watching machinery run smoothly. Calm victorious moment. Balanced lighting. Emotional payoff. 16:9. No text, no borders.
20.
Final legacy shot. Balcony overlooking repaired section of station. People working together below. Engineer, mother, and child standing side by side looking at stars through large window. Hopeful futuristic tone. Wide cinematic composition. Soft glow lighting. 16:9. No text, no borders. Something like that, he said after a moment. He repositioned the module and secured it back into place, reinforcing the mount with a second strip of adhesive. The internal structure settled, no longer shifting when he adjusted the angle. One issue resolved. He turned his attention to the detached leg. The connector pin was bent, but not beyond repair. He straightened it carefully, applying minimal pressure to avoid snapping it entirely. The exposed filament still held continuity, a good sign. He aligned the leg with its socket and pressed it back into place, holding it steady while applying a thin seal around the joint. Functional. Not perfect, but it would hold. Behind Nara, the woman, her mother, presumably, watched in silence. The initial tension in her posture hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted. Less defensive, more uncertain, as if she wasn't sure what to make of this. Marcus closed the casing, pressing along the seam until it clicked softly back into alignment. He ran his thumb across the surface once, ensuring the seal held. Then he picked the toy up again.
"There's one more thing," he said.
Nara leaned forward slightly. Marcus gave the toy a gentle shake. No rattle. Good. He turned it over and located a small recessed switch along the underside. His thumb hovered over it for a brief second. Then he pressed. For a moment, nothing happened. The station noise filled the gap. Distant alarms, overlapping voices, the constant hum of strained systems. Then, a soft vibration.
Low.
Steady. A faint, rhythmic sound followed, barely audible at first, then building into a gentle, pulsing purr that resonated through the toy's casing.
Alive.
Nara's breath caught. It was subtle, almost silent against the noise of the station, but her reaction wasn't. Her eyes widened, every one of them catching the light differently now, reflecting something that hadn't been there before. She stepped forward without thinking, hands lifting instinctively. Marcus placed the toy back into her grasp. She held it close immediately, fingers tightening around the casing, as if confirming it was real. The soft purring continued, vibrating lightly against her palms. "You fixed him," she said, not surprised.
"Certain."
Marcus shrugged slightly. wiping his hands on the cloth again. It was a small repair. Nara shook her head. A small movement, but definite.
Not small, she said.
She lifted the toy slightly, holding it with careful reverence. Kip is my friend. The words settled into the space between them, cutting through the mechanical noise in a way none of the alarms had managed. Behind her, her mother exhaled slowly. Something in her expression softened. Not fully, not completely, but enough to be noticeable. The guarded edge in her gaze dulled, replaced by something more complicated. Recognition, gratitude, and something else she wasn't ready to name. Thank you, she said quietly. Marcus nodded once. Nara looked back at him. Her grip on the toy steadied, confidence returning now that the problem had been solved. You'll be here tomorrow, she said. Again, not a question. Marcus hesitated. Just for a fraction of a second. The station was unstable. Assignments changed. Sections failed. Nothing here was guaranteed beyond the next system check. But she was still looking at him like the answer already existed. I'll probably be here, he said. It wasn't a promise. But it was enough. Nara nodded once, satisfied. Decision made. She turned, clutching Kip close as she moved back toward her mother. The woman rested a hand lightly on her shoulder, guiding her away, but not before casting Marcus one last look.
Different this time.
Less guarded. More aware. Marcus watched them go for a moment. Then he turned back to the workbench. The tools were still where he'd left them. The next broken component waited exactly as before. The station hadn't paused. The chaos hadn't lessened. Nothing had changed. Except, he reached for the next repair. And for the first time since arriving on the station, the work felt slightly different. She came back the next day. Marcus noticed before he looked up. Not because she made noise, she didn't, but because the space across the workbench shifted again. That same subtle distortion in the rhythm of the station. Movement bending slightly around a fixed point. He finished tightening a coupling ring before glancing up. Nara stood exactly where she had the day before. Kip rested in her hands. Intact, quiet, but no longer broken. You stayed, she said. Marcus leaned back slightly, wiping his fingers against a cloth. So did you. She stepped closer this time, not stopping at the edge of the workbench. Her eyes moved, not just watching him but tracking the tools, the components, the motion of his hands as he reached for another part. What are you fixing today? She asked. Flow regulator, Marcus replied. Keeps the water pressure stable. Nara frowned slightly. The water doesn't move on its own? It does, Marcus said, adjusting the regulator housing. Just not where we need it to. She considered that. Then, how does it know where to go? Marcus paused. Not because the question was difficult, but because of how she asked it. Not casual.
Precise.
He tapped the side of the regulator lightly. It doesn't know, he said. We tell it.
How?
He hesitated again, then reached for a thin cable and held it up.
Paths, he said.
We build paths. The water follows them. Nara's gaze sharpened. Like Kip follows me. Marcus glanced at her. Something like that. She nodded once, filing it away. No wasted reaction. No confusion left hanging. Just absorption. The third day, she arrived earlier. Marcus was already at the bench, recalibrating a sensor array, when she appeared at his side. Kip made a soft purring sound as she set him down carefully on the edge of the workspace. He's working, she announced. I can't hear that. She watched him for a few seconds before speaking again. What happens if the sensor is wrong? Marcus adjusted the calibration dial without looking up. Then everything that depends on it is wrong too. Nara's eyes flicked to the display panel. And you fix it? If I can find the error. How do you find it? Marcus stopped. This time, he looked at her directly. You ask questions, he said. She held his gaze, then nodded, as if that answer made perfect sense. By the end of the first week, she no longer waited to be acknowledged. She arrived, positioned herself beside the workbench, and observed. Sometimes she spoke. Sometimes she didn't. Marcus adjusted without realizing it. His explanations became shorter, clearer, more deliberate. He caught himself simplifying processes, Not because he had to, but because she listened in a way that made complexity feel unnecessary. On the 7th day, she brought something new. A small cluster of wires, twisted, uneven, clearly taken from a discarded unit. She placed them on the workbench between them. "This doesn't work," she said. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Where did you get that?" "Section 9, she replied. "It was broken." He picked up the wires, turning them over in his hand. "They're not connected properly." Nara leaned closer. "Can you fix it?" Marcus glanced at her, then at the wires, then back at her. "You want me to fix it?" he said. She shook her head. "No." A pause. "You show me." That was new. Marcus studied her for a moment longer, then set the wires down and reached for a connector piece. "Watch," he said. The days started to blur after that. Not because they were the same, but because they followed a rhythm. Nara would arrive. She would watch. She would ask. And each question would go just a little further than the last. How does electricity move? Why does this one get hot? What happens if two paths cross? Marcus answered. At first simply, then more carefully. Because she wasn't just listening. She was building something with the answers. Selith began to linger. At first, she stayed at a distance, watching from the edge of the corridor, her posture still guarded, her attention divided between Marcus and everything else that could go wrong. But each day, she stood a little closer, a little longer, until one afternoon, she didn't leave at all. Marcus noticed her when he reached for a tool and found it already placed within reach. He glanced up. She stood on the other side of the bench, expression neutral but eyes focused. "You missed it," she said, nodding toward the component he'd been about to adjust. Marcus followed her gaze. She was right. He corrected the alignment without comment, then looked back at her. "Thank you." Selith inclined her head slightly. Nara didn't look surprised. "You see things too," she said to her mother. Selith's gaze softened, just for a moment. "I try." By the second week, the space around Marcus's workbench had changed. Not physically, but functionally. Tools were still scattered in controlled patterns. Components still waited in various states of repair. The station still groaned under pressure. But now, there were 3 of them. Marcus worked. Nara learned. Selith watched. And sometimes, helped. On the 14th day, Nara spoke without looking up from the small circuit she was examining. "You fix things," she said. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He adjusted a pressure valve, listening to the shift in the system's hum before answering. "That's the job." Nara shook her head slightly. "No." She looked up at him, all 4 eyes steady. "Not just machines." Marcus held her gaze for a second longer than usual. Then he looked back down at his work. Behind her, Selith's expression changed, subtle, but unmistakable. Not surprise. Recognition. The station alarms pulsed again in the distance. Another system warning. Another problem waiting. Marcus reached for the next tool. Nara watched. And the loop continued. Selith stopped pretending she was only there for Nara. It happened gradually, so gradually that Marcus didn't register the shift until it had already settled into something consistent. At first, she had hovered, always just outside the immediate space. Close enough to intervene, far enough to remain detached. Her attention split between Marcus's hands and every possible exit point in the corridor. Watching him, measuring, waiting for something to go wrong. Now, she stood beside the workbench. Not constantly, not comfortably, but deliberately. Like someone testing the weight of unfamiliar ground. It was late in the cycle when she spoke first. The station had quieted, not because things were stable, but because exhaustion had begun to outweigh panic. The alarm still pulsed occasionally, but the sharp edge had dulled. Movements were slower, voices lower. Marcus was recalibrating a filtration node when he felt her gaze settle on him. Not passing. Focused. "You don't rush," Selith said. Marcus didn't look up immediately. "Rushing breaks things," he replied. A pause. "Things are already breaking," she said. That made him glance up. She was watching him the way she always had, but there was less resistance in it now. Less expectation of failure. "Exactly," Marcus said. "That's why I don't rush." Selith considered that, then nodded once. Not agreement. Acknowledgement. Nara sat cross-legged on the floor beside them, Kip resting in her lap as she carefully adjusted a small wire cluster Marcus had given her earlier. Her movements were slower than his, less precise, but intentional. Selith watched her for a moment before speaking again. She doesn't usually stay this close to anyone, she said. Marcus returned his attention to the node. She seems comfortable. That's not the same thing. He didn't respond. Selith shifted her weight slightly, her gaze flicking briefly toward the corridor before returning to him. She avoids most adults, she continued. Especially men. Marcus's hands paused, just for a fraction of a second, then resumed. Why? He asked. Selith didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was quieter. Because the last one she trusted didn't stay. The words landed without force, but they carried weight. Marcus adjusted the final setting on the node, sealing the panel before straightening. He wiped his hands slowly, giving the silence space to settle instead of filling it. I'm not him, he said. It wasn't defensive, just factual. Selith's eyes held his. I know, she said. Another pause. That doesn't mean she does. Nara looked up suddenly. You stayed yesterday, she said, as if continuing a different conversation entirely. Marcus glanced down at her. I did. You'll stay tomorrow. Again. Not a question. Selith watched his reaction carefully. Marcus met Nara's gaze. I'll be here as long as I'm needed, he said. Nara nodded, satisfied. For her, that was enough. For Selith, it wasn't. Later, when Nara had moved a short distance away to test her circuit against a power strip, Selith spoke again. She chooses carefully, she said. Marcus leaned against the edge of the workbench, arms resting loosely at his sides. She's a child. Selith shook her head.
No.
Her eyes shifted toward Nara. She learns patterns.
Fast.
Faster than most. Marcus followed her gaze. Nara was adjusting the wires, her movements precise, her attention unwavering. He'd noticed. Of course he had. She trusts you, Selith said. Marcus exhaled quietly. She trusts that I fix things. That's not the same.
He didn't argue.
Because it wasn't. Selith stepped closer. Not into his space, but near enough that the distance between them no longer felt intentional. There are people here, she said, voice low, controlled, who fix things because it's their job. Her eyes returned to his. And there are people who fix things because they can't stand seeing them broken. Marcus held her gaze. And you're trying to decide which one I am. Selith didn't deny it. A distant tremor ran through the station, subtle but unmistakable. The floor beneath them vibrated just enough to shift a loose tool at the edge of the bench. Nara didn't react. Marcus did, but only to steady the tool before it fell. Selith's posture tightened instantly, her attention snapping toward the corridor, scanning for signs of escalation. When nothing followed, she relaxed slightly. Marcus noticed. You're always waiting for something, he said. Selith's jaw tightened. Because something always happens. That's not the same as it happening now. It is if you're wrong.
Marcus considered that.
Then nodded once.
Fair.
Nara returned a moment later, holding up the wire cluster. It works, she announced. Marcus took it from her, inspecting the connections. They were uneven. Imperfect. But functional. You did this? He asked. She nodded. You showed me. Marcus glanced briefly at Selith. Her expression had changed again. Not guarded. Not cautious. Something quieter.
Pride.
She chose you, Selith said softly. Marcus handed the wires back to Nara. I didn't do anything special. Selith's gaze sharpened slightly. You fixed her toy. That was simple. No, she said. A small shake of her head. That was the first time she saw something broken become whole again. Marcus didn't respond. Because that wasn't about the toy. Nara tugged lightly at his sleeve. Marcus, she said. He looked down. Can we make something new tomorrow? What kind of something? She thought for a moment. Then, something that helps. Marcus smiled faintly. We'll see what we can build. Nara nodded, already satisfied with the answer. Selith watched the exchange in silence. Then, quieter than before, "She's attaching to you."
Marcus didn't look at her this time.
"I notice." Selith's voice dropped further. "And I don't know if that's a good thing." That made him pause. He turned slightly, meeting her gaze again. "You think I'll leave?" "I think everyone leaves," she said. No hesitation. No softness. Just truth. Marcus held her gaze for a long moment. Then,
"I'm still here," he said.
"Not a promise. Not a guarantee. But not empty either." Selith studied him, searching for something. Certainty, maybe. Or proof. She didn't find it, but she didn't look away. Across the workbench, Nara had already started taking apart another small component, Kip resting beside her, quietly humming. The station groaned around them, strained, unstable, unpredictable. But here, for the moment, nothing was breaking. The first warning didn't sound like an alarm.
It was too clean for that.
A single tone, sharp, precise, cut through the station noise and vanished just as quickly, leaving a strange silence in its wake. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Tools paused in midair. Even the constant mechanical hum seemed to hesitate, as if the station itself was listening. Marcus looked up. That wasn't a system fluctuation. That was a signal. A second tone followed, lower, sustained, layered with a faint harmonic that vibrated through the floor beneath them. This time, it didn't fade. It pulsed.
Once. Twice.
Then the station erupted. Alarms ignited across every channel at once, overlapping frequencies colliding into a chaotic wall of sound. The amber lighting snapped to a harsh, strobing red. Somewhere above them, a bulkhead slammed shut with enough force to shake dust from the ceiling panels. "Containment breach, Sector 12, repeat." The announcement dissolved into static. Marcus was already moving. "Stay close," he said, not looking back as he swept the tools off the workbench into a side compartment and sealed it with a quick snap. His eyes tracked the corridor, calculating routes, exits, choke points. Behind him, Nara froze. Not panicked.
Stopped.
Her hands hovered over the half-assembled component she'd been working on, Kip resting beside it, still humming softly as if the world hadn't changed. Selith reacted instantly. "Nara." She crossed the space in 2 steps, pulling her daughter up from the floor and against her side. Her posture shifted completely. No hesitation now, no uncertainty. Just action. "What is it?" Marcus asked, already knowing the answer wouldn't be simple. Selith's eyes flicked toward the corridor, scanning. "Not internal," she said. "That pattern, it's external." Another tremor rolled through the station, stronger this time. The lights flickered violently, cutting out for a split second before snapping back. From somewhere distant, a muffled impact. Then another. Closer. Marcus's jaw tightened. "Raiders," Selith said. The word landed like a physical force. The corridor filled almost instantly. People surged past in uneven waves, some moving with purpose, others driven purely by instinct. Voices overlapped in rising panic. Directions clashed. No one seemed to fully agree on where safety actually was. Section 14's to expose. No. Fall back to the lower rings. The lower rings are already compromised. Marcus stepped forward, positioning himself slightly ahead of Selith and Nara without thinking. "Where?" he asked. Selith didn't hesitate. "Maintenance corridors," she said. "Narrow. Easier to defend." Another impact, closer now. The floor shuddered beneath them, a sharp metallic groan echoing through the structure. Dust drifted from the ceiling seams. "Move," Marcus said. They pushed into the current of bodies, cutting across it instead of following it. Marcus led, carving a path through the chaos with controlled urgency. Not fast enough to lose them, not slow enough to get caught. Behind him, Selith kept Nara close. One arm wrapped tight around her, the other free, ready to react. Nara didn't struggle, didn't ask questions. But her grip tightened around Kip. The soft purring continued, steady, unchanged. A strange contrast to the rising panic. They reached the junction just as the lights failed again. This time, they didn't come back immediately. Emergency strips along the floor flickered weakly, casting long, fractured shadows across the corridor. The air felt different, thicker, charged with something that prickled against the skin. Then, a distant scream. Cut short. Marcus didn't slow down. Left, Selith said. He turned without hesitation. The maintenance corridor was narrower, just as she'd said. The walls closed in, lined with exposed conduits and sealed access panels. The noise from the main station dulled slightly here, replaced by the close, echoing sound of their own movement. For a moment, it felt contained, safer. Then the explosion hit. It wasn't close enough to see, but it was close enough to feel. The shockwave tore through the structure like a physical force, slamming into the corridor with brutal efficiency. The walls shuddered. A section of ceiling buckled and gave way. Marcus reacted before the sound fully registered. He turned, grabbing Selith and Nara both, driving them down and forward as the collapse came crashing through the space they'd occupied a fraction of a second before. Metal screamed. Debris cascaded. The world compressed into noise and force and impact. Marcus hit the ground hard, twisting as he went, positioning himself over them, arms braced, body taking the brunt of the falling debris. Something struck his shoulder. Another impact glanced off his back. Dust filled the air instantly, choking, blinding. "Stay down," he shouted, voice raw against the ringing in his ears. He felt movement beneath him, Selith shifting, adjusting her hold on Nara. The child was pressed between them, small, protected, still clutching Kip. The purring had stopped. Or maybe it was just drowned out by the noise. Marcus held position, muscles locked, absorbing the last of the falling debris as the collapse settled into stillness. Silence followed. Not complete, but close. The alarms were distant now, muffled by the debris. The chaos of the station reduced to a low, indistinct roar somewhere beyond the collapse section. Marcus exhaled slowly, testing his weight. Nothing critical.
Pain, yes.
But functional. He pushed himself up carefully, shifting the debris aside just enough to create space. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Selith shook her head, though her breathing was uneven. "Nara?" The child moved, lifting her head from where she'd been pressed against Selith's shoulder. "I'm here," she said. Her voice was small, but steady. Marcus let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. He sat back slightly, wincing as his shoulder protested. Selith noticed immediately.
"You're bleeding," she said.
He glanced down. A shallow cut along his temple, another across his arm. "Nothing deep. I've had worse," he said. Selith reached out anyway, pressing a strip of cloth against the cut with careful precision. "You protected us," she said quietly. Marcus met her eyes. There was no hesitation there now. No doubt.
"No," he said.
"I just—"
He stopped.
Because there wasn't a better way to phrase it. "I could not." Nara shifted between them, looking up at him. All four of her eyes were wide, but not with fear. With something else. Understanding. "You stayed," she said. Marcus didn't answer immediately. Because this time, it wasn't about the station, or the job, or the next repair waiting on the workbench. This time, it meant something different. Above them, the station groaned again. Unstable. Still breaking. Still dangerous. But for the moment, they were alive. Together. Dust settled slowly through the fractured corridor, drifting in thin gray sheets that caught the weak emergency lighting and turned the air into something thick and suspended. Marcus didn't move at first. Not because he couldn't, but because he was listening. Not to the alarms. Not to the distant chaos still echoing through the station.
To them.
Nara's breathing, steady, controlled, pressed close against Selith's side. Selith's heartbeat, faster than before, but stabilizing.
Alive.
That was enough. Only then did Marcus shift his weight, carefully bracing one hand against a bent support beam as he eased himself upright. The movement sent a sharp pulse through his shoulder, forcing a brief tightening of his jaw. Damage. Manageable. He rotated the joint slightly, testing range. Functional.
Good.
The collapse section had sealed the corridor behind them almost completely. Twisted metal and fractured plating formed a jagged wall where the passage had once been open. Small gaps remained, but nothing large enough to move through without serious effort, and time they didn't have. Ahead, the corridor extended another 20 meters before turning out of sight. One direction left. Marcus glanced back at Selith. "We keep moving," he said. Selith nodded once. No argument. No hesitation. The doubt that had lived behind her eyes since the beginning,
Gone.
replaced by something sharper.
Decided.
Nara shifted, her small hands still gripping Kip tightly. The toy was quiet now, its usual soft purring absent, likely disrupted by the impact. She noticed. Her fingers pressed lightly against its casing. "It stopped," she said. Marcus crouched slightly, ignoring the protest from his shoulder. "Let me see." She handed it to him, without hesitation. Again, that same absolute trust. Marcus turned the toy over quickly, scanning for visible damage. The casing held. The repaired leg was still intact, but a faint crack ran along one edge, new. He pressed gently. No response. The internal module had likely shifted again. He exhaled. "Later," he said, handing it back. "We'll fix it." Nara held it close, nodding once. That was enough for now. Another tremor rolled through the station, less violent than before, but enough to send a faint shudder through the already weakened structure. Time was running thin. Marcus stood fully. "Stay behind me," he said. This time, it wasn't a suggestion. They moved. Slowly at first, navigating the uneven floor and scattered debris. Marcus took each step with deliberate care, clearing a path where necessary, testing unstable sections before committing weight. Behind him, Selith mirrored his pace perfectly, one hand on Nara's shoulder, guiding her without restricting her movement. Not carrying her, trusting her to move. That mattered. Halfway down the corridor, the lighting flickered again, brief, erratic pulses that cast the walls into shifting patterns of shadow and glare. Then, a sound. Not structural. Not environmental. Deliberate. Marcus stopped instantly, raising a hand. Silence. Selith froze behind him, pulling Nara closer without a word. The sound came again. A metallic scrape. Closer this time. From ahead. Marcus's eyes narrowed, scanning the corridor. The turn at the far end remained out of sight, but whatever had made that sound was moving toward them. Not running. Controlled. Intentional. Selith leaned in slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're not alone." Marcus didn't respond. He didn't need to. The corridor felt smaller now. Tighter. The distance between them and the unseen presence compressing with every passing second. Marcus shifted his stance slightly, positioning himself between the sound and the others without thinking. Instinct. Behind him, Nara's fingers tightened around his sleeve. Not pulling, just holding. The sound stopped. For a moment, nothing moved. Then, a shadow crossed the far wall. Marcus reacted instantly. "Back," he said, low and sharp. Selith didn't argue. She pulled Nara with her, stepping behind a partial support column that jutted from the wall, creating a narrow point of cover. Marcus didn't follow. He stepped forward. It wasn't bravery. It wasn't recklessness. It was calculation. If something came around that corner, it would meet him first. The seconds stretched, then snapped. A figure lunged into view from the turn, fast, disoriented, moving with uneven urgency. Not a raider, a survivor. Blood along one side. Breathing ragged. Eyes wide with something close to panic. They staggered forward, nearly collapsing as they reached the open stretch of corridor. Marcus didn't lower his guard immediately. "Stop," he said. The figure froze. For a split second, confusion replaced panic. Then recognition. "They're inside," the survivor rasped. "Multiple entry points, sections are falling." Their voice broke. "They're not just taking supplies." Marcus's expression hardened. Of course they weren't. Another distant impact reverberated through the station. Closer again. Time compressed. The survivor stumbled past them, disappearing back the way Marcus and the others had come, toward a dead end they didn't realize existed yet. Marcus didn't call them back. There wasn't time. He turned. Move, he said. This time.
Faster.
They reached the end of the corridor just as another shockwave tore through the structure. The turn opened into a wider junction, damaged, partially collapsed, but still passable. Marcus scanned it quickly. 2 possible paths. One blocked, one barely holding. He didn't hesitate. This way. They pushed through the unstable passage just as the section behind them gave way with a deafening crash, sealing the route completely. No going back. On the other side, silence. Not the distant chaos of the station. Not the muffled noise of collapse. True silence. The kind that came from sealed structures and reinforced walls. A temporary pocket of safety. Marcus slowed, then stopped, only now allowing himself to breathe fully. Selith stepped beside him, her grip on Nara loosening slightly as the immediate danger passed. For a moment, none of them spoke. Then Selith turned to him, really looked at him, not as a stranger, not as a risk, but as something else entirely. You didn't hesitate, she said. Marcus wiped a streak of dust from his forehead, smearing it without noticing. There wasn't time. That's not what I meant. He met her gaze. She held it.
Steady. Certain.
You chose us, she said. Not a question. Not uncertainty. A statement. Marcus exhaled slowly. Because she was right. Not about the choice. About the fact that there hadn't been one. I just did what needed to be done, he said. Selith shook her head.
No.
A small step closer. You didn't protect the station. Her voice softened. You protected us. Nara stepped forward before Marcus could respond. She slipped her hand into his. Small.
Warm. Certain.
You stayed, she said again. This time, Marcus didn't correct her. He tightened his grip slightly. Not enough to restrain. Just enough to answer. And in that moment, something shifted. Not in the station. Not in the chaos still unfolding beyond the walls. In here.
Between them.
Trust. No longer tentative. No longer questioned. Locked. The silence didn't last. It never did. But here, inside the reinforced junction where the walls held firm and the noise of the station dulled into a distant, muffled presence, it stretched longer than expected. Long enough to feel unfamiliar. Marcus stood near the center of the space, shoulders still tense from the last impact, breath steadying in slow, controlled cycles. Across from him, a narrow access panel flickered weakly, its display cycling through warnings that no longer felt immediate. For the first time since the alarms began, there was nothing to fix. No tool in his hand. No system demanding attention.
Just stillness.
Nara sat on the floor beside him, legs tucked beneath her, Kip resting in her lap. The toy remained silent, its usual soft purr absent, but she held it the same way she always had, carefully, as if it still worked, as if it would again. Her fingers traced along the casing absent-mindedly, following the small crack that had formed during the collapse. Waiting. Not anxious.
Certain.
Selith stood a few steps away, watching Marcus. Not scanning the exits. Not tracking the environment. Him. The shift was subtle, but unmistakable. For the first time since he had met her, her attention wasn't divided. You could leave, she said. The words were quiet, measured, but they cut clean through the silence. Marcus didn't respond immediately. Not because he hadn't heard, but because the statement didn't fit the moment. Leave? The station was still unstable. Sections were compromised. Systems failing faster than they could be repaired. Leaving wasn't simple. It wasn't even realistic. You're assigned here, Selith continued, stepping closer. Temporary rotation. When this stabilizes, when command reestablishes control, you'll be reassigned. Marcus exhaled slowly. That's how it works. Yes, she said. A pause. But that's not what I asked. Nara looked up. Her attention shifted instantly. Away from the toy, away from the crack she'd been tracing, locking onto the exchange between them.
She didn't speak.
But she listened. Selith closed the remaining distance between them. Not invading, but no longer keeping space. When things stop breaking, she said, her voice steady despite the tension beneath it. When the systems hold, when the station doesn't need you every second. She held his gaze. What happens then? Marcus felt the weight of the question settle in. Not as pressure, as clarity. Because this wasn't about the station.
Not really.
I go where I'm needed, he said. It was the simplest answer, the most accurate. And it wasn't enough. He saw it immediately in her expression. Selitha's jaw tightened slightly. That's not an answer, she said. It is. No, she replied. That's a deflection. Marcus didn't argue, because she wasn't wrong. Behind them, a distant tremor rolled through the station, muted here, barely more than a vibration beneath their feet. The world was still unstable, still uncertain. But this moment, wasn't about survival. It was about choice. You think she doesn't understand? Selith asked quietly, her gaze flicking briefly toward Nara before returning to him. She does. Marcus followed her glance. Nara was still watching them, completely still, Kip held loosely in her hands now.
Listening.
She knows what leaving looks like, Selith continued. She's seen it before. The words carried no accusation, only truth. Marcus's chest tightened slightly. Not from injury, from recognition. I didn't promise anything, he said. No, Selith agreed. You didn't.
A pause.
That's why this matters. Silence settled again. Thicker this time. Heavier. Nara stood slowly. Kip slipped slightly in her grip before she adjusted it, holding it close again as she crossed the small distance between them. She stopped in front of Marcus. Looked up. All four eyes steady. You fix things, she said. The same words. The same certainty. But they carried something different now. Marcus felt it immediately. I try, he said. Nara shook her head.
No.
A small step closer. You do. She lifted Kip slightly, as if presenting evidence. You fixed him. Marcus glanced at the toy, at the crack along its side, at the silence where the purring used to be. Not completely, he said. I will, she replied instantly. No doubt. No hesitation. Then, she looked back at him. And you fixed us. The words landed harder than anything that had happened during the collapse. Marcus didn't respond. Because he couldn't. Not immediately. Selith watched him carefully. Not pushing. Not interrupting. Waiting. Nara's grip tightened slightly on his sleeve. A mirror of the moment in the corridor. Only now. There was no danger. No urgency. Just the question. Will you stay? She asked. There it was. Not from Selith. Not framed carefully. Not layered with context or expectation. Simple.
Direct.
Final. Marcus felt the weight of it settle fully. Not as pressure. As consequence. Because this wasn't about assignments. Or rotations. Or systems that needed repair. This was about something far less structured. Far less predictable.
He looked at Nara.
At the absolute certainty in her expression. Then at Selith. At the guarded hope she wasn't trying to show. And for the first time since arriving on the station, he didn't have a technical answer. No system to analyze. No clear path to follow. Just a decision. Marcus exhaled slowly. I don't know, he said. The truth. Unfiltered. Nara didn't pull away. Didn't look disappointed. She simply held his sleeve a little tighter. As if the answer wasn't finished yet. Selith nodded once. A small movement. Accepting the honesty. Even if it wasn't what she wanted. Another distant alarm pulsed faintly through the structure. The station was still calling. Still breaking. Still demanding. Marcus looked down at Nara again. At the toy in her hands. At the crack that still needed fixing. I'm still here, he said. It wasn't a promise. Not yet. But it was enough. For now, the station didn't stabilize overnight. It never does. Recovery came in fragments. Partial systems coming back online. Temporary fixes holding just long enough to prevent collapse. Teams moving from one failure point to the next without ever truly finishing. Marcus became part of that rhythm. Not assigned. Not directed. Integrated. The junction they had sheltered in became a waypoint first, then a workspace. Then, without anyone saying it out loud, a center. Days passed, measured not by clocks, but by cycles of repair. Marcus worked where the damage was worst: filtration, power routing, structural relays. The systems that kept the station alive, even in its weakened state. But every time he returned, they were there. Nara claimed a corner of the space without asking. A small section of floor cleared of debris, where she arranged salvaged components in careful patterns. Wires, connectors, fractured panels, things others discarded, she collected. Kip sat beside her, still silent, still waiting. Selith moved differently now, no longer hovering at the edges. She worked, organizing supplies, reinforcing temporary seals, assisting with repairs when Marcus needed a second set of hands, and sometimes before he asked. Efficient, focused, present. Marcus noticed it in pieces. The way tools were where he needed them. The way pathways stayed clear. The way Nara never had to search for materials because Selith had already found them. Not dependence. Coordination. "You're staying busy," Selith said one evening. Marcus tightened the final bolt on a pressure unit and leaned back slightly, rolling tension out of his shoulders. "That's the job." Selith shook her head faintly.
"No," she said.
"That's a choice." He didn't answer.
Because she was right.
The official channels reconnected 3 days later.
Not fully.
Not cleanly, but enough. A signal reached the sector, fragmented, delayed, but clear in its intent. Status reports, personnel tracking, reassignment protocols. Marcus received the notification without ceremony. A short message. Simple. Standby for extraction and redeployment. He read it once, then closed it. Nara noticed anyway. She always did. "You're leaving," she said. Not accusing. Observing. Marcus looked down at her. She sat cross-legged, a small circuit board in her hands, wires threaded through it in uneven but functional lines. Kip rested beside her, unchanged. "I haven't left," he said. "That's not what I asked." The same precision, the same clarity. Marcus crouched beside her, studying the circuit she was building. "You improved the connection points," he said. She nodded. "You showed me." A pause. Then, "Will you go?" He could have answered the way he had before. Deflected, redirected, given her something incomplete. He didn't. "I could," he said. The truth. Nara considered that. Then nodded once.
"Processing."
"Then we build faster," she said. Marcus blinked. "That's your solution?" "Yes." She held up the circuit. "If we finish things, you don't have to fix them anymore." Simple. Logical.
Flawed. But
focused. Marcus let out a quiet breath that almost resembled a laugh. "That's not how it works." Nara tilted her head. "Then change how it works." Across the workspace, Selith watched the exchange in silence. No interruption. No correction. Marcus looked at the circuit again. At the uneven lines that still held current. At the intention behind them. Then he stood. The next message came 2 cycles later. Clearer. More direct. Extraction window confirmed. Prepare for reassignment. Marcus read it.
didn't close it this time.
Just stood there, the words settling into place. Around him, the station continued its slow, uneven recovery. Systems stabilizing. Failures decreasing. Not fixed, but holding. He could leave. The logic was sound. His work here was temporary. His role, replaceable. Marcus. He turned. Selith stood a few steps away, her expression unreadable. "You received it," she said. Not a question. He nodded. A moment passed. Then another. "What will you do?" she asked. Marcus looked past her. To the small corner where Nara worked.
To Kip.
To the scattered components slowly becoming something functional under her hands. He exhaled. "I requested an extension," he said. Selith didn't react immediately. Didn't speak. Then, "Indefinite?" she asked. Marcus met her gaze. "Yes." Silence followed. Not empty. Not uncertain.
Full.
Nara looked up. She hadn't heard the conversation.
Not all of it.
But she saw the shift. The change in posture. The stillness that meant something had been decided. "You're here," she said. Marcus nodded once.
For now, he added.
Nara smiled.
Small. Certain.
"That's enough," she said. Selith turned slightly, looking away for just a moment. When she looked back, something had changed. Not completely.
Not openly.
But enough. Relief. The next days settled into something new. Not survival. Not chaos. Something in between. They ate together when food was available. Worked together when systems failed. Sat in silence when there was nothing urgent left to fix. Marcus found himself explaining things without being asked. Nara asking questions before he finished answering. Selith stepping in where both of them hesitated. A pattern. Not planned. Not forced.
Formed.
One evening, as the station lights dimmed into a softer cycle, Nara leaned against his side, Kip resting between them. The toy was still silent. Still waiting.
Marcus, she said.
He glanced down. You stayed. This time, it wasn't a question. Marcus rested his hand lightly against the edge of the workbench. Felt the steady hum of the systems beneath it. Not perfect, but working. I'm here, he said. And for the first time, that felt like an answer. The station didn't announce the moment things changed. There was no signal. No system update. No clear dividing line between before and after. It happened quietly, the way most important things do. Section 14 no longer felt temporary. The fractures in the walls were still there, sealed, reinforced, but visible. The lighting still flickered occasionally. The system still carried the faint instability of something that had been pushed too far for too long. But the panic was gone, replaced by motion with purpose. Repairs continued. Life resumed. Marcus stood at the workbench, adjusting the alignment on a newly installed regulator. The hum beneath his fingers was steady, stronger than before, less strained. Functional. Reliable. He tightened the final connection and stepped back. Try it, he said. Nara didn't hesitate. She moved forward, Kip tucked under one arm, the other hand reaching for the activation switch Marcus had just installed. She pressed it. The regulator engaged instantly, a low, consistent vibration running through the casing as the system stabilized. Nara's eyes lit up. It works, she said. Marcus nodded. You built most of it. She shook her head. You showed me. Across the space, Selith watched. Not from a distance. Not guarded. Present. The moment held for a second longer. Then Nara turned. Not toward the system. Toward Marcus. I need to tell you something, she said. There was no urgency in her tone. No excitement. Just importance. Marcus leaned slightly against the workbench. What is it? Nara shifted her weight, adjusting her hold on Kip. I talked to my mother, she said. Marcus glanced briefly at Selith. She didn't interrupt. Didn't look away. And, he asked. Nara stepped closer. Close enough that he had to look down to meet her gaze. She says you're part of us now. The words landed softly, but they didn't feel light. Marcus exhaled slowly. That's something you should decide, he said. Nara shook her head. We did. Simple. Final. Behind her, Selith moved. Not forward, but not back either. Just enough to be seen. You've been here, she said quietly. Marcus looked up. Not because you had to, she continued. Because you chose to. Marcus didn't respond. Because that was true. Selith held his gaze. And we've changed because of it. A pause. Not uncertainty.
Care.
I have, she added. Silence stretched between them. Not uncomfortable. Not unresolved. Just full. Nara broke it. Of course she did. Marcus, she said. He looked down again. Her expression had shifted. Not curious. Not observational.
Certain.
Can I call you something else? Marcus frowned slightly. Something else? She nodded. Not Marcus. He felt something tighten in his chest. Not pain. Not quite. What would you call me? He asked. Nara hesitated. For the first time. Just a second. Then, Papa. The word didn't echo. Didn't carry through the station.
Didn't need to.
It landed exactly where it needed to. Marcus didn't move.
Didn't speak.
Because in that single word, everything shifted. Not engineer. Not technician. Not temporary. Chosen. Accepted. Belonging. He looked at Selith. She wasn't surprised. But she wasn't unaffected either. Her posture had stilled completely, her eyes fixed on him. Not waiting for permission, not asking for approval. Just open. This wasn't her decision. Not alone. Marcus looked back at Nara. At the certainty in her expression. At the absence of doubt. You don't have to, he started. Nara shook her head immediately. I want to. No hesitation. No fear. Marcus felt the weight of every decision that had led here settle into place. The moment in the corridor. The collapse. The extension request. The days spent building something that hadn't existed before. All of it, condensed into this. Papa, Nara said again. Softer this time. Testing. Marcus closed his eyes briefly. Just for a second. Then opened them. Okay, he said. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. But it was enough. Nara didn't wait. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, pressing Kit between them without caring. Marcus froze for half a heartbeat. Then, slowly, carefully, he returned it. Not out of obligation. Not out of uncertainty. Because it felt right. Selith watched them. Then stepped closer. Not separating them. Joining. Her hand rested lightly against Marcus's arm. Not tentative. Not hesitant. Present. For a moment, the three of them stood there. No alarms. No urgency. No systems failing. Just stillness. Marcus felt something settle inside him. Not like a repair. Not like a fix. Like something aligning. Clicking into place.
Whole.
Nara pulled back slightly, looking up at him. All four eyes bright.
Certain.
Papa, she said again. This time, it wasn't a question. Marcus smiled. A small, quiet expression that didn't need to be bigger.
Yeah, he said.
Across the station, systems continued to hum. Repairs continued. Life continued. But here, something new had been built. Not from parts. Not from plans. From choice. The next morning didn't feel different. That was the strange part. No ceremony. No shift in the station's tone. No visible marker that anything had changed. And yet, everything had. Marcus reached the workbench before the lights fully stabilized, as he always did. The systems had settled into a predictable rhythm again. Minor fluctuations, manageable faults, nothing close to collapse. For the first time since he arrived, he wasn't chasing failures.
He was improving them.
You're early. He didn't turn.
He didn't need to.
I didn't leave, he replied. Nara stepped into place beside him, Kip tucked securely under one arm. The toy still didn't purr, but she carried it the same way, like it mattered regardless of whether it worked. She set a small panel onto the workbench. I made this, she said. Marcus glanced down. It was crude. Uneven wiring. Irregular spacing. The connectors weren't aligned properly, and one of the circuits looped inefficiently before reconnecting to the main line. But it held continuity. Barely. But it did. What is it supposed to do? He asked. Nara leaned closer, pointing to different sections. It senses movement, she said. And then she paused, searching for the word. Responds, Marcus offered. She nodded immediately.
Yes. Responds.
Marcus picked it up, turning it slightly. It's wasting energy here, he said, tapping the looping section. Too much resistance. Nara frowned. Then it's wrong. Marcus shook his head.
No, he said.
It works. A pause. It's just not efficient.
Nara considered that.
Then nodded once. Show me. And just like that, the loop began. Marcus didn't fix it. He adjusted one section, then handed it back. Your turn. Nara leaned in, studying the change.
Not copying.
Understanding. Why is that better? She asked. Marcus pointed to the path. Shorter route. Less energy lost. She traced it with her finger, then rewired the loop. Not perfectly, but closer. Marcus watched. Didn't correct immediately. Let her see it. It still gets hot, she said after a moment.
Why?
Marcus asked. She frowned. Too much energy, not enough use. Marcus nodded. Good. She adjusted again. Iteration. Across the workspace, Selith watched the exchange with quiet focus. Not distant. Not detached. Engaged. She stepped forward, placing a small container of components onto the table. You'll need better connectors, she said. Nara didn't look up. I can make them. Selith tilted her head slightly. You can, she agreed. A pause. But you don't have to. Nara hesitated, then reached into the container. Marcus noticed the shift.
Small.
But important. Learning wasn't just about building.
It was about choosing when not to.
The days settled into structure. Not rigid, but consistent. Morning. Marcus worked. Nara observed. Mid-cycle. Nara built. Marcus guided. Late cycle.
They tested. Failed.
Adjusted. And every time, the results improved. Why does this one stop working after a while? Nara asked one afternoon. Marcus didn't answer immediately. He leaned over, watching the small motor she had assembled. It sputtered, then stalled.
Heat, he said.
Nara tilted her head. But you said heat comes from wasted energy. It does. Then I wasted too much. Marcus shook his head. Or you didn't plan for it. She frowned, thinking. How do I plan for something I can't see? Marcus paused, then reached for a sensor module. You make it visible. He handed it to her. Her eyes sharpened. Understanding. Selith stepped in again, this time closer than before. You can reroute the excess, she said, pointing to a section of the circuit. Nara looked between them, then back at the board. Show me both ways, she said. Marcus and Selith exchanged a brief glance. Then,
they did.
That was new. Not just teaching. Not just guiding. Collaborating.
3 minds.
One problem. The station continued around them. Repairs ongoing, systems stabilizing, people moving with increasing confidence through once broken corridors. But here, in this small corner of Section 14, something else was happening.
Growth.
Not forced. Not assigned.
Built.
Papa. Marcus looked up. The word no longer stopped him. Didn't catch. Didn't feel unfamiliar. It fit. Nara held up a revised circuit. This one works longer, she said. Marcus took it. Tested it. It held.
Better, he said.
Nara smiled. Not wide. Not exaggerated.
Certain.
Selith watched that moment. Then stepped closer, her hand brushing lightly against Marcus's as she reached for another component. Not accidental. Not hesitant. Natural. You're teaching her faster than most instructors, she said quietly. Marcus shook his head. She's learning faster than most students. Selith's expression softened. She always has. A pause. But not like this. Marcus glanced at her. She held his gaze. She trusts you, she said. Not cautious. Not uncertain.
Certain.
Marcus looked back at Nara. At the way she leaned over the workbench, fully absorbed, fully engaged. At the way she no longer asked if something would work, only how to make it better. She trusts that we fix things, he said. Selith shook her head slightly.
No.
A small step closer. She trusts you. The distinction mattered. Marcus didn't argue, because he knew she was right. Nara suddenly looked up again.
Eyes bright.
Papa, she said, what if we make something bigger? Marcus raised an eyebrow. Bigger how? She gestured outward. To the station. To everything beyond the workbench. Something that helps more people. Marcus leaned back slightly. That's a different kind of problem. Nara smiled. Then we learn that too. Selith let out a quiet breath that almost sounded like a laugh. Marcus looked between them. At the child who refused limits. At the woman who no longer resisted connection. At the space that had become something more than a repair zone. All right, he said. Nara leaned forward instantly. What do we start with? Marcus looked at the systems around them. At the stabilizing infrastructure. At the flaws that still remained. Then back at her. We start with something that matters. Nara nodded. It was all she needed. And the loop continued. IT started with a question. It always did. Papa, Nara said, leaning over the workbench, her fingers still resting on the circuit she had just stabilized. What's the biggest thing you've ever fixed? Marcus didn't answer immediately. Not because he didn't know, but because the answer didn't fit the way she meant it. He wiped his hands slowly on a cloth, eyes drifting across the systems around them. The filtration units humming in steady rhythm. The patched conduits running along the walls. The reinforced panels that still bore the marks of collapse. Depends on what you mean by big, he said. Nara frowned slightly. Something important. Marcus glanced at Selith. She was watching again, quiet, attentive, letting the exchange unfold. They're all important, he said finally. Nara shook her head.
No, she said.
Some things change more. That was different. Marcus leaned against the edge of the bench, studying her.
You're asking about impact, he said.
She nodded immediately. He looked back at the systems around them, then beyond them, to the station, to everything still recovering, still stabilizing, still imperfect. I haven't fixed it yet, he said. Nara tilted her head. Then we should. Simple. Again. Always. Marcus let out a quiet breath. That's not something one person can do. Nara didn't hesitate. Then we do it together. Selith stepped closer at that. Not interrupting, but not distant either. Even together, Marcus said, it's not that simple. Nara's eyes sharpened.
It never is.
Marcus paused, then nodded.
Fair.
She turned back to the workbench, pushing aside the smaller components she'd been working on. We need something bigger, she said. Define bigger, Marcus replied. Nara gestured outward again. Not just the station this time. Beyond it. Something that helps everything, she said. Marcus followed her gesture. To the reinforced walls. To the sealed corridors. To the systems barely holding together. Then further. To the idea of what came after. Start smaller, he said. Nara frowned. But you said we fix important things. Marcus crouched slightly, bringing himself level with her.
We do, he said.
But we build them in pieces. She considered that. Then what's the first piece? Marcus reached over and tapped the filtration unit beside them. This, he said. Nara looked at it, unimpressed. It's already working. Barely, Marcus said. That got her attention. He opened the panel, exposing the internal structure. You fixed parts of it, he continued. But it's still inefficient. Nara leaned in. Closer. How do we make it better? Marcus stepped back slightly, giving her space. That's your problem to solve.
She didn't argue, didn't hesitate.
She started pulling it apart. Selith watched carefully, then stepped in. That line feeds two sectors, she said, pointing to a secondary channel. If you disrupt it, both lose pressure. Nara paused, adjusted. Then I don't disrupt it, she said. Marcus smiled faintly. Good start. The work shifted that day. Not repair. Redesign. Nara didn't just fix broken connections anymore.
She questioned them.
Why does it split here? Why is this path longer? What happens if we change this? Marcus answered when needed. Redirected when necessary. Selith filled the gaps. She's thinking ahead, Selith said quietly at one point. Marcus nodded. She's always been able to, she continued. A pause. But now she knows what to do with it. That was the difference. By the end of the cycle, the filtration unit looked different. Not cleaner. Not simpler.
Smarter.
Flow paths shortened. Energy loss reduced. Output stabilized beyond baseline. Nara stepped back, wiping her hands on a cloth. It's better, she said. Marcus checked the readings.
It was.
Good, he said. Nara looked up at him. That helps more people, she said. Marcus nodded. It does. A pause. Then, we do more. Of course. The ideas grew after that. Not all at once, but steadily. Can we make the power systems share energy better? What if the sensors talk to each other? Why does each section fix things alone? Each question pushed outward. Beyond the workbench. Beyond Section 14. Into the station itself. Marcus didn't shut them down.
Didn't simplify them away.
He expanded them. Then you need communication between systems. Then you need stable relays. Then you need something that coordinates everything. Nara absorbed it all. Selith added structure. You'd need permissions, she said. Access to central routing. Nara looked between them. Then we get access. Marcus raised an eyebrow. That's not easy. Nara smiled. Then it's worth doing. One evening, as the artificial lights dimmed into a softer cycle, Nara spread a rough layout across the workbench. Not precise, not clean, but intentional. What is this? Marcus asked. Nara pointed to different sections. This is the station, she said. Marcus leaned in. And this? She tapped a central cluster. This is where everything connects. Selith stepped closer, studying it. That's central control, she said. Nara nodded. If we connect everything better, she continued, then things don't break as much. Marcus crossed his arms. And if they do? Nara looked up. Then we fix them faster. Silence settled for a moment. Because the idea wasn't wrong.
It wasn't simple.
It wasn't immediate. But it was
possible.
Selith exhaled slowly. She's thinking like an engineer, she said. Marcus shook his head slightly.
No, he said.
A glance at Nara. She's thinking like something else. Nara didn't hear that. She was already adjusting the layout. Already improving it. Already building something that didn't exist yet. Papa, she said without looking up. Marcus responded immediately. Yeah. She tapped the center of the design. This is where we start. Marcus looked at it. At the idea. At the scale. At what it could become. Then he nodded. All right, he said. Selith watched him. You're encouraging this, she said. Marcus met her gaze. Yes. A pause. And if it works, she asked. Marcus looked back at Nara. At the station. At everything still waiting to be fixed. Then it changes everything. Nara smiled. That was all she needed. The failure didn't announce itself. Not at first. It began as a fluctuation, small enough to ignore, buried beneath the normal noise of a station still recovering. Marcus noticed it anyway.
Of course he did.
The filtration readout dipped.
Not sharply.
Just enough. A fractional drop in pressure stability, barely outside acceptable tolerance. Most wouldn't have seen it. Marcus did. He leaned closer to the panel, eyes narrowing as he tracked the flow rate.
Something's off, he said.
Nara looked up instantly. Where? Marcus tapped the display.
Here.
Pressure variance. Nara frowned. It was stable yesterday. It was, Marcus said. Selith stepped in beside them, her expression tightening as she read the numbers. That's not local, she said. That's coming from upstream. Marcus nodded. Central routing. The word hung in the air. Nara's eyes sharpened. The place we marked. Marcus glanced at her, then back at the panel. Yes. The next fluctuation hit harder. The system stuttered, flow dropping suddenly before surging back unevenly. The hum of the filtration unit shifted, no longer smooth but strained, irregular. That got everyone's attention. Across Section 14, heads turned. Conversations paused. The fragile sense of stability that had been building
cracked.
Pressure loss in Sector 14. A voice called from down the corridor. Compensate from backup. Backup's already at capacity. Marcus was already moving. Access panel, he said. Nara was faster. She reached it first, pulling it open with practiced efficiency. Inside, the system pulsed unevenly, data flickering across the display, unable to settle. It's not holding the flow, Nara said. It can't, Marcus replied. Something upstream is breaking the balance. Selith turned toward the corridor. If central routing fails, we lose more than water, Marcus finished.
Power. Cooling.
Everything. The alarms hit then. Not the chaotic overlap from before. Not the uncontrolled panic.
Structured.
Directed. System instability detected. Central routing disruption. All sectors prepare for cascade failure. The words landed clean.
Cold.
Nara looked at Marcus. We fix it. Not a question. Marcus met her gaze. This was it. Not a small repair. Not a local fix. The system they had talked about. The one they had planned. Breaking. Show me the layout, he said. Nara moved instantly, pulling her rough design from the side of the workbench and spreading it out. It's here, she said, pointing to the central node. Selith leaned in. That's where the redistribution happens. Marcus scanned it. Then the panel. Then back. They're not balancing the load, he said. Nara's brow furrowed. Then we balance it. Marcus shook his head. It's not that simple. The system's too big, too many inputs. Nara didn't back down. Then we simplify it. A beat. Marcus looked at her. Really looked. Then something clicked. Not the whole system, he said. Nara leaned closer. Just the path we need. Selitha's eyes widened slightly. A bypass, she said. Marcus nodded. Temporary routing. Direct flow. Nara's hands moved across the layout. From here, she said, tracing a line.
To here.
Marcus followed. That cuts through 2 sectors. Selith shook her head. Those sectors can't handle full load. Nara adjusted. Then we split it. Marcus pointed. Parallel routing. Nara nodded instantly. Yes. The plan formed. Not perfectly. Not cleanly.
But fast.
Tools, Marcus said. Selith was already moving. Nara grabbed the necessary components without being told. They worked. Not in sequence. Together. Marcus opened the panel further, exposing deeper layers of the system. Nara rewired connections, her movements faster now, more precise. Selith monitored the readings, calling out changes before they became failures. Pressure dropping, left channel. Redirecting. Too slow. Then push more current. Careful, you'll overload. I know. The system buckled again. A sharp drop. A warning spike. For a moment, it felt like it would collapse completely. Then, Nara adjusted one final connection.
Now.
Marcus activated the reroute. The system responded. Not smoothly. Not instantly.
But
it held. Flow stabilized. Not perfect, but balanced. The hum returned. Strained, but steady. Silence spread through Section 14. Not absence of sound. Absence of panic. Selith exhaled slowly. It's holding. Marcus checked the readings. It's working. Nara looked between them, then smiled. We fixed it. Marcus shook his head slightly. We fixed it together. That mattered. Around them, the station adjusted. Systems compensating. Stabilizing. Recovering. Not collapsing. Not this time. Nara looked back at the layout. At the lines she had drawn. At the idea that had seemed too big just days ago. It worked, she said quietly. Selith rested a hand on her shoulder. Yes, she said. A glance at Marcus. You made it work. Marcus leaned back slightly, letting the tension leave his shoulders. Not completely, but enough. This wasn't the same as before. Not a desperate reaction. Not survival.
proof.
The lessons. The questions. The time spent building something more than repairs. It mattered. Nara looked up at him. Papa, she said. Marcus met her gaze. We fix things. He smiled. Yeah, he said.
Now.
It was true. The station didn't celebrate. There were no announcements. No recognition broadcast across the sectors. Just
stability.
The kind that felt fragile, but real. Lights held steady. Systems hummed without strain. The constant edge of collapse, still present, still possible, but no longer immediate. Marcus stood at the edge of Section 14, looking out over the repaired corridor. People moved differently now. Not rushing. Not panicking. Working. Living. Behind him, Nara adjusted Kip on the workbench, carefully reconnecting the internal module they hadn't had time to fix earlier. Selith organized tools nearby, her movements calm, precise. It all looked normal, but Marcus knew better. Nothing about this had been normal. You're thinking again, Selith said quietly. He didn't turn, just looking at what changed. Selith followed his gaze. The station's still broken, she said. Marcus nodded. Yeah. A pause. But it's holding. Nara's voice cut in from behind them. Because we fixed it. Marcus turned this time. She was holding Kip now. The toy let out a soft, steady purr. Fixed. He walked back toward her slowly. Crouched slightly. Not everything, he said. Nara shook her head.
No.
A small smile. But enough. Marcus studied her for a moment, then glanced at Selith, then back at the station. All the systems. All the failures. All the things still waiting to break. And yet, he let out a slow breath. You know, he said, voice calm, grounded, one person can't fix everything. Nara listened. Marcus continued. But one person can try. A pause. Then, and sometimes, he looked at both of them. That's enough. Silence followed. Not empty. Not uncertain. Complete. Nara nodded. Then we keep trying. Marcus smiled faintly. Yeah, he said. Because now, that wasn't just an idea. It was something they had proven. The station didn't become perfect. It never would. Even weeks later, small faults still surfaced. Minor pressure drops, sensor delays, occasional flickers in the lighting that reminded everyone how close things had come to collapse.
But now,
they were handled differently. Problems didn't spread. They were caught, adjusted,
solved.
Not by one person, by many. Section 14 changed first. What had once been a repair zone became something else entirely. Not formal, not official, but known. People started bringing broken components, not just for Marcus but for Nara. Small things at first. A faulty sensor, a loose connector, a misaligned panel. She didn't fix them alone. Show me, she would say. And just like that, the loop spread. Children gathered. Then adults. Then technicians who had once worked in isolation, now watching, learning, contributing. Kip sat at the center of it all, softly purring as Nara demonstrated simple circuits, motion sensors, energy paths. Not just fixing things. Teaching. Marcus stood at the edge more often now. Not stepping back. Just observing. He still worked. Still repaired systems when needed. Still stepped in when things grew too complex. But less frequently. Because the work was no longer his alone. Selith adapted fastest. Where once she had watched, cautious and distant, she now coordinated. Organized teams. Distributed tasks. Kept systems and people aligned. Her voice carried differently now. Not guarded. Confident. And when she stood beside Marcus, it wasn't uncertain. It was chosen. One evening, under the softened glow of the station's artificial cycle, the three of them stood on the small balcony overlooking Section 14. Below, the space moved with quiet purpose. Groups working,
sharing,
learning. Nara leaned forward against the railing, Kip in her hands, eyes reflecting the steady lights below. Look, she said. Marcus followed her gaze. I see it. Selith rested lightly against his side.
You built this, she said.
Marcus shook his head.
No. A small glance at Nara.
We did. Nara turned, smiling. We're not done. Marcus let out a quiet breath.
No, he said.
Below them, a small group of children gathered around a workbench, carefully assembling a simple circuit under guidance. One of them hesitated.
Paused.
Looked uncertain. Another stepped in. Showed them. The circuit lit.
Small.
Simple. Working. Marcus watched it all. The systems. The people. The patterns repeating, growing. The station wasn't just holding anymore. It was changing. Nara tugged lightly at his hand.
Papa, she said.
He looked down. What's next? Marcus followed her gaze upward. Through the reinforced glass. To the stars. Endless. Unbroken. Waiting. He smiled. We build, he said. Nara nodded instantly. Selitha's hand tightened slightly in his. And, together, they turned back, toward the workbench. Not to fix what was broken, but to create what didn't exist yet. Behind them, the station glowed. Alive. Evolving. No longer just surviving. Ahead of them, everything else.